Greetings and welcome from the League of Women Voters of Portland. I'm Debbie Kay, President of the League. The League is dedicated to making democracy work, and one of our core beliefs is that democracy functions best when voters are informed about issues and engaged in their communities. For that reason, we present programs like this to give our Portland and Multnomah County neighbors an opportunity to think about the issues that affect our lives and the well-being of our communities. We are pleased to have all of you join our program tonight, featuring the project manager and 3 commissioners from Portland's Charter Review Commission. They will share the Commission's recommended major reforms to our city government that will appear on the November 8th general election ballot. The League is grateful for support from the Carol and Velma Sailing Foundation, the Weiss Foundation, and from our media partner, Metro East Community Media. They record our community education panels and our voter education presentations and rebroadcast them on community access channels and social media. Please tell your friends, colleagues, and family members to watch this video to be informed voters, and also listen to the podcast, which will be posted on our website, lwvpdx.org, around September 10th. We sincerely thank our speakers, the moderator, and the League volunteers who donate their time and expertise to bring these programs to you. The moderator for tonight's program is my esteemed colleague, Audrey Zunkel-DeCourcy. Audrey is a member of our Portland League Board of Directors. Turning the program over to you, Audrey. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for joining us tonight. We're looking forward to the discussion from the 4 panelists about reforms recommended by the City of Portland's Charter Commission. We'll hear from our speakers for an hour, and then we'll open up the program for your questions through the chat in Zoom. First, we want to introduce a brief description of the major proposed changes to Portland's city government structure and elections for city officials. This November, Portlanders will vote on a ballot measure. This November 8th general election. The measure will include 3 interdependent reforms. If voters pass the measure, 1, voters will rank candidates in order of their preference using ranked choice voting. 2, there will be 4 new geographic districts in Portland, with 3 members elected to represent each district, expanding City Council to 12 members. And 3, City Council will focus on setting policy, while the mayor will run the city's day-to-day operations with the help of a city administrator. Tonight's event is an informational presentation. The speakers will be explaining the measure, but not advocating for or against any part of it. In addition, this is a presentation produced through our Education Fund, which is dedicated to providing nonpartisan educational information. While our organization engages in advocacy on local political issues, we draw a line between our advocacy work and our educational work, and tonight's panel is about education. Later this fall, we will present balanced voter service forums with speakers presenting both sides of the ballot measure campaign. Please note that tonight's program is not a voter forum because the commission members and staff are not permitted to advocate for these reforms. For that reason, we ask that you please frame your questions in a way that you're not asking them to take sides. If you are interested in hearing from the campaigns for and against the charter reform measure, you can check out our voter forum, which will be recorded and available in October. You can also read your League of Women Voters Voter's Guide, coming out by the beginning of October. And additionally, our voter service resources, including voters' guides and voter forums, will all be posted on our website as soon as they're available. lwvpdx.org. The League of Women Voters of Portland and the League of Women Voters of Oregon have studied the components of this measure. Our in-depth, balanced studies examined various alternatives for city governments and a number of different voting methods. The Portland League City Government Study was published in September 2019. It reviewed the strengths and weaknesses of the current system in Portland. It examined options for the form, function, roles, and responsibilities of a city government, and it considered standards that should be applied to determine if a particular system was effective in serving its constituents. Our city government study was written quite intentionally to prepare for the 2022 charter reform effort. The Oregon League's election methods studies similarly looked at the pros and cons of each of the voting methods that were studied. To read those studies and the League's conclusions based upon them, please go to our website, lwvpdx.org, and to the Oregon League's website, lwvor.org. As we said, the purpose of this panel is educational, to help Portlanders understand the changes that will happen in their city if these reforms go into effect. Tonight, we especially want to focus on how the measure is going to impact regular Portlanders' lives if it passes. How will we access city services? How will our interactions with our elected representatives be different? What will change about how we vote? We expect that you all watching tonight, our members and friends watching this panel, will be the most trusted ambassadors to your own social networks, explaining this charter reform measure when it's time to vote. We're grateful to you and our audience for taking the time to join us. We hope that our discussion will leave you feeling more confident when you talk with your networks about what the city's charter reforms would mean. This evening, we had the opportunity to hear directly from the project manager, Julia Meyer, and 3 charter commissioners about the reforms that they recommended and how these changes could affect the lives of Portlanders. At the end of their time, we will take questions from you in our audience through the Zoom chat feature. So joining us tonight are Julia Meyer, Charter Commission Project Manager. Welcome. And 3 commissioners, Candace Avalos, Becca Orbelau, and Melanie Billings-Young. Thank you all for joining us tonight. Thank you for your dedicated public service. We are excited to hear from each of you. Our first speaker is Julia Meyer, who in 2020 was selected by the City of Portland as the Charter Commission Project Manager. Previously, she served as Executive Director of the City Club of Portland and the Coalition of Communities of Color. Julia.
Thank you so much, Audrey, and thank you to the League of Women Voters of Portland for the invitation and for everyone who's joining us in attendance. So I have about a 15-minute educational presentation I want to go over, just explaining the proposal. Just waiting for it to come up. Thank you so much. So yeah, this presentation is just going to go over the Commission's proposed ballot measure regarding the structure of Portland's government. The Charter Commission understands that charter reform requires engaging Portlanders across neighborhoods, lived experiences, and backgrounds. The Charter Commission has been committed to a community-driven process to inform its decision-making, as well as having an equitable, accessible, and transparent community engagement process. The Charter Commission partnered with almost 20 community-based organizations to design and implement community education and engagement activities to engage Portland's diverse communities. On the screen, you can see a snapshot of just some of the Charter Commission's engagement to date. The Commission hosted 26 community listening sessions with almost 600 attendees, received over 1,600 public comments, including 16 hours of verbal public comment, and held over 120 briefings and presentations on charter review. In November, just like Audrey just said, voters will have the opportunity to decide whether to amend the city charter to reform the structure and operation of city government. The measure includes 3 interdependent reforms: allowing voters to rank candidates in order of their preference using ranked choice voting, 4 new geographic districts with 3 members elected to represent each district, expanding the city council to a total of 12 members, and a city council that focuses on setting policy, and a mayor elected citywide to run the city's day-to-day operations with the help of a city administrator. So currently, our city council, consisting of a mayor and 4 commissioners, exercises legislative and executive powers. Executive powers include managing city bureaus. The proposed ballot measure would change Portland's form of government to what's called a mayor-council form of government. In a mayor-council form of government, there would be a clear separation of powers and roles of city leaders would be clearly defined so Portlanders know who to hold accountable. Under the proposed ballot measure, members of city council would no longer directly manage city bureaus. City council would continue to exercise legislative power to make laws and would focus on meeting with and serving Portlanders. If the measure passes, a mayor elected citywide would run the city's day-to-day operations with the help of a city administrator. A city administrator hired by the mayor and confirmed by city council would exercise executive power to implement laws and manage city bureaus. If the proposed ballot measure is passed by voters, a mayor would no longer serve on or regularly vote with council. A mayor would only vote to break ties on city council because 7 affirmative votes would be required to pass any non-emergency ordinances. One city councilor chosen by their peers would serve as council president and preside at council meetings. City council would make the laws and a mayor would carry out those laws. However, the mayor would also be allowed to introduce policy. If passed, the proposed measure would add a provision to the charter on budgeting. The current city charter does not mention budgeting. If passed, a mayor would be responsible for proposing a budget no later than May 5th of each year. The city council would function as the budget committee and is responsible for approving the budget. City resources can only be spent in conformance with the budget approved by council. If passed, the proposed ballot measure would allow a mayor to provide political leadership to quickly address urgent local issues. And since they would be elected citywide, they would be accountable to all voters. So while a mayor would have executive authority over city business, they would delegate some critical responsibilities to a city administrator. If the measure passes, the city administrator would be able to focus on managing the city's bureaus. A city administrator would oversee city services such as road maintenance, fire safety, and water services. The city administrator would be nominated by the mayor, subject to approval by a majority of city council. A mayor would provide day-to-day supervision of the city administrator. The city administrator would be in charge, with a couple of exceptions, of hiring, firing, and supervising bureau directors, better insulating the bureaus from political jockeying and improving service delivery. The proposed measure carves out 2 exceptions to hiring and firing for the city attorney and the chief of police. Those positions would be nominated by a mayor, subject to approval by city council. A mayor would be able to remove the city attorney and the chief of police. If voters do not pass the proposed ballot measure, there would be no changes, and the mayor and 4 commissioners would continue to exercise both legislative and executive powers, including the managing of city bureaus. The proposed ballot measure includes the creation of 4 new geographic districts, with each district electing 3 councilors for an expanded 12-member city council. If the measure passes, a councilor elected from a district must have resided and been a registered voter in that district for at least 1 year prior to the election. The 3 councilors in each new district would run in the same race at the same time. A mayor and auditor would continue to be elected citywide. Councilors' primary offices would be located within their districts. Finally, I want to address community questions about the salaries of the new district-based expanded council. The city's charter is currently silent about their salaries, leaving city commissioners to set their own salaries when they vote on the budget. The proposed ballot measure includes an independent salary commission, similar to those used in other jurisdictions, that will set the salaries for elected officials. The proposed 5-member salary commission would be composed of qualified human resource professionals with compensation experience who cannot be City of Portland employees, elected leaders, or candidates. Salaries would be set every 2 years. The proposed ballot measure does not propose a district map. The proposed ballot measure provides for a districting process that would be undertaken by another independent community body with the time and resources to engage Portlanders. If voters pass the proposed measure in November, the districting process would begin immediately. If the measure passes, a 13-member geographically diverse independent district commission would be seated by January 31st, 2023. The district commission would be responsible for preparing and adopting a district map. The district commission would be required to engage Portlanders. They would hold a citywide public hearing early in the process to engage Portlanders in district criteria, and then they would be required to hold at least 2 public hearings in each proposed district before voting to adopt a districting plan. Consistent with state and federal laws, the district commission would ensure that each district is, as nearly as practical, contiguous, meaning one connected piece, compact, utilizes existing geographic or political boundaries, keeps communities of common interest together, is connected by transportation links, and is of equal population. The district commission may consider additional criteria. If voters do not pass the proposed ballot measure, there would be no changes, and the mayor and the 4 commissioners would continue to be elected citywide. The proposed measure includes electing all city leaders using ranked choice voting. Ranked choice voting is a voting method that allows voters to rank candidates in their order of preference. In the example, you see candidates are being ranked first choice, second choice, third choice, and so on for as many as you care to offer a preference. If passed, a voter could rank as many or as few candidates as they want, or simply just choose one candidate like the current system. Using ranked choice voting, if the voter's first choice does not win, there are other candidates the voter's vote can count towards. So if the first choice is eliminated, the vote would count for the next choice candidate. This reduces the number of wasted votes since voters can see their vote counted for another candidate of the voter's choice. As of November of last year, 43 jurisdictions across the United States used ranked choice voting in their most recent elections, including Benton County in Oregon and New York City. And 55 jurisdictions will use it in their next election. In the multi-winner elections for city councilors, the commission is proposing proportional ranked choice voting. Cambridge, Massachusetts has been electing its city council in a multi-winner district with proportional ranked choice voting since 1941. And 90 countries across the world use proportional representation. If passed, ranked choice voting would eliminate the need for May primaries for city elections. Eliminating primaries would help ensure that more Portlanders can elect councilors during one election with higher voter turnout. In the proposed ballot measure, Portland would continue to elect city leaders every 2 years. A mayor and all councilors in 2 districts would be elected in presidential years. And the auditor and all councilors in the other 2 districts would be elected in midterm elections coinciding with the Oregon governor's race. If voters do not pass the proposed ballot measure, there would be no changes, and Portland voters would continue to cast 1 vote for each citywide office election. So for the mayor, the auditor, and city council members. If voters pass the measure in November, the process to implement will begin immediately. The Independent District Commission would be seated by January 31st of 2023. The district map would be adopted by September of 2023. District-based elections using ranked choice voting would be in place for the November 2024 election. And a mayor and new city council would enter office January 1st of 2025 into the new form of government's roles and responsibilities. The city is currently developing a detailed transition plan and will need to allocate funds to implement the reforms. The City Budget Office provided estimates of the fiscal impact of the proposal to change city government. If the measure passes, annual costs are estimated between $900,000 to $8.7 million, which is between 0.1% and 1.4% of the city's general fund discretionary resources. These annual ongoing costs would begin in 2025. The range of the cost estimate is dependent on policy decision-making that is outside of the charter. So for example, as I talked about earlier, there's a salary commission. That salary commission is going to set the salaries of the elected officials. The ongoing cost estimates don't consider any potential cost savings of the reform package that may be achieved through the consolidation of bureau functions or the streamlining of the city's organizational structure and delivery of services. If voters do not pass the proposed ballot measure, there'd be no changes to Portland's form of government or election system, and the estimated annual cost of between $900,000 and $8.7 million would not be incurred. And with that, I just want to thank the League again and the folks who are attending for the opportunity to share the proposal with you.
Well, thank you, Ms. Meyer, for educating us on these reforms. Thank you also for your dedication to this important city initiative. At this point, we want to move into having a chance to hear from the 3 charter commissioners who joined us tonight to talk about different elements of the reform. I'd like to start out by introducing Commissioner Candace Avalos. Welcome. In addition to her work as a charter commissioner, she is currently the chair of the city's Citizen Review Committee and serves on the governor's Public Safety Training and Standards Task Force to help bring transparency and accountability to the Portland Police Bureau. In her professional life, she's the executive director of Verde, a local nonprofit. So Commissioner Avalos, we have some questions for you about city governance. If the charter reforms pass, how will we and other Portlanders contact our city councilors? How will we raise concerns or questions about a specific city bureau or service? What will be different from the current structure in interacting with the city council? The floor is yours, Commissioner Avalos.
Thank you so much. Very glad to be here and appreciate the League of Women Voters for offering this educational opportunity to Portlanders. So as far as if the reforms pass, how will Portlanders contact their counselors? One of my favorite things about the proposal is that we have proposed multi-member districts, and that not only will Portlanders have geographic representation on council, they're also going to have 3 different voices representing that community's needs. So this is going to allow for more intentional engagement by counselors to the citizens that they represent. And I also hope that it will lead to more place-based constituent services that will make it easier for an average person to be able to contact that office of their representatives and reach their representatives directly. As far as addressing concerns or questions about city services or bureaus, the oversight of all of the bureaus are now going to be under the mayor's umbrella, and they are also going to be supervised. They will be supervising the city administrator who's overseeing that bureau management as well. And so I don't think that that means, you have to go necessarily to the mayor or the city administrator to voice those concerns about bureau related issues. However, that is an option. You can go directly to that source, but I do think that your city council representative is still your voice in that way. So being able to go to your representative and say, here's a service that is affecting me or a bureau that is affecting the way that or my needs in the city. It's your council person's responsibility to bring that back to the council, and they will be working with the mayor and the administrator and the bureaus by way of either sitting on different committees, working to make policy recommendations, or just in general being that voice of the community on those issues. So even though the mayor is directly supervising bureaus, which is different from how it currently is being done, I don't think that means that city councilors have no interaction at all or aren't the bridge for an average Portlander to talk about bureaus or services. And then as far as what's going to be different from the current structure, I feel like the main difference is that, your city council member, instead of dealing with the day-to-day issues of bureau management, they're going to have more time to be doing constituent services, setting a policy agenda and a vision for the city. And by, not only having more access to them, but also having a way for, Portlanders to get involved in electing the people that they want to represent them. I think that's going to make a huge improvement in how you are connecting with your person, with your representatives. And I think that's going to allow for more constituent engagement, which is absolutely what we feel we heard from Portlanders, that they wanted a way to connect to their representatives. And we believe that this forum will do that.
Thank you, Commissioner Avalos. Are there any other comments from the other commissioners about the topic of engaging with city services and bureaus in this new form of government?
I think Candace really covered it well, as she always does. I didn't think I heard this, Candace, so excuse me if I'm repeating you. But one thing that is part of this is that the counselors will be living in the districts that they represent. That is a requirement. So that person will not only represent you, but they will be living the same experience that you are living in terms of the problem that your districts are facing.
The other thing that I would just want to emphasize is the fact that now that city councilors will be no longer responsible for the day-to-day operations of the city and will be a legislative body. It also allows them to free up additional capacity to help constituents navigate and access city services, so that they are going to be, and in fact, because you have multi-member, multi-winner districts in a defined geographic area, Portlanders have multiple paths to entry to get a question answered or to, again, access city services. So there'll be, again, more of an opportunity for city councilors to do constituent services than they're able to do now.
Thank you, Commissioner Billings-Young and Commissioner Urbelau. Our next question is for Commissioner Becca Urbelau, who previously served as the former executive director of Our Oregon, leading the organization's work to advance social and economic justice with a focus on ballot measures. Before directing Our Oregon, she was the community relations manager for Metro, leading the engagement and community partnership strategy to develop and implement the agency's racial equity strategy. So our question for you, Commissioner Urbelau: the League believes in the importance of having a responsive government, which engages with the community, addresses community concerns, and better represents us all. This measure proposes district representation and a larger city council with 12 members to address policy issues. You've begun to touch on some of this, but how would the city council function differently than it does now in this larger 12-member form? And how will district representation be more equitable?
Yeah, thank you for the question, and thank you for having us and for this opportunity for Portlanders to learn more about this important topic. I also just wanted to touch on the League's kind of beliefs and goals around a responsive and representative form of government, which fully aligns with the Charter Commission's desired outcomes, which were directly informed by extensive engagement that Julia referenced. We've had conversations with thousands of Portlanders who repeatedly said that they wanted a city that was more accountable, transparent, accessible, responsive, and representative and reflective. So it's nice to see that the League's goals are aligned with the desired outcomes of the Charter Commission. As Julia mentioned, if passed, the City Council would expand from 5 voting members, a mayor and 4 councilors, to 12 city councilors. And before I share about how that job changes and how it leads to more equitable representation, I just want to spend a little bit of time sharing about what their current job is and its impact in terms of what we heard from Portlanders during our engagement. So with the commission form of government, we're the only big city in the country with that form of government. We've had it since 1913 for more than 100 years. What we heard from Portlanders is that has led to essentially some challenges that they're facing, right? That they have seen, again, this is Portlanders sharing their experience with us. They have seen the work of the bureaus being siloed and inefficient. Services and budgets are often politicized rather than coordinated and aligned. And city councilors may not come in with the expertise or experience in managing day-to-day operations. So now that we're moving the city council to being a legislative body, again, we talked about this earlier, that provides them the time and intention to really focus on engaging Portlanders in developing policy and being closer to the ground in districts, developing policy that will help us move forward together as a city. And also allows for more capacity and time for city councilors to help constituents navigate city services. Moving to districts will inevitably increase geographic representation for every part of the city. In fact, it's guaranteed. That's what a district model does. And a point of fact that East Portland has been underrepresented for decades. And in fact, we've only had 2 members of the city council who've lived east of 82nd. And if you look at the data, the majority of the city council members have all come from the west side or inner east. And since 1995, 75% of those serving on the city council have been white men. So as we mentioned, 4 districts, 3 elected members per districts, and geographic districts with 3 council members combined with a ranked choice voting method creates the foundation for what's called a proportional representation system. And as Julia mentioned, it's the most common type of system in the world and is rooted in the belief that everyone should have a right to fair representation. So proportional voting system strives to accurately represent voters in proportion to the share of their votes. So let's say voters make up 33% of the voters in the district. Under proportional representation system, which this measure proposes, they should get at least 1/3 of the representation on council. And again, as Candace mentioned, Portlanders will have more than 1 representative for Portlanders to connect with, to champion their issues, whether it's climate change, tenants' rights, or affordable housing, and they'll have more capacity to help constituents navigate and better access services.
Thank you, Commissioner Urbelau. Do the other commissioners have anything to add to that great explanation we got?
She nailed it.
Indeed, thanks, Commissioner Avalos. Well, now I'd like to introduce Commissioner Melanie Billings-Young, who's an international negotiation consultant, a mediator, and an adjunct professor in the PSU Business School. Born in Portland, she has lived in 9 countries, helping individuals and organizations resolve disputes, bridge cultural differences, and build more productive relationships. Throughout her career, Dr. Billings-Young has worked to help women amplify their voices. So the question for you, Commissioner Billings-Young, is about elections. How will voting be different if the ballot measure passes? What will be the effects of using ranked choice voting for electing the mayor, auditor, and members of the city council? And a kind of follow-up question to that is, how are voters going to learn how to vote with ranked choice voting? So 2 parts to that question.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Audrey, and thank you everyone from the League of Women Voters. I really enjoy this question because I think it's so strange, because a lot of people have been making this out to be something that is very complicated, something that is very difficult. In fact, the difference for voters will be minimal. Right now, you go in and you choose 1 candidate in our elections. In many other situations, you have the ability, and you know, what do I like first best, second best, third best? In fact, I was just on an airplane a couple of weeks ago going on vacation, and the hostess said, what is your first choice for a meal? And if that one's not available, what is your second choice? I managed to cope with that difficult question, as I think Portlanders would be able to manage ranked choice voting. What it means is that instead of choosing a single person, you rank as many as you choose to rank. You can just name 1 if that's what you want to do, although it would be a bit of a waste of a vote. But you could name first choice, second choice, third choice, 4th choice. That's probably about as much as you would need to do. And that is exactly the same, whether it's a 1-person district, such as for mayor, or it's a multi-member district, such as it is for city councilor. The voting method is exactly the same for the voter. The only difference is that in the single-person district, 1 person wins, versus in a multi-member district, there will be 3 winners. Now, before you start thinking that that is radically different, right now, as we know, in our primary, there are 2 winners. we managed to cope with the complexity of that. In fact, Alaskans who just went through a very successful ranked choice voting, they did some post-voter surveys and found out that 85% of Alaskans said it was a simple method. Now, I have thought a lot about why people are thinking or presenting this as being so stressful. And I think that maybe it's simply because it's different. One thing that I find kind of interesting is that, as Julia mentioned, the current system we have was developed in 1913. That was 1 year after women got the vote in Oregon. And that vote barely passed. It passed by 52% because everyone was saying, women voting, that's way too complicated. They're never going to be able to manage that. Well, 100 years later, we are still somehow coping. You ask the question of how people will know how to do it. Part of the charter, not the one we wrote, although we are not altering that. Part of the charter mandates that instructions will be going out to all voters to show them clearly how they are to do it. And you asked what the effect would be. The effect, well, there's a kind of a double effect. The first one is by having this system, we can eliminate the primary. The primary election currently gets about half the number of voters as the general election. And so that means that people in our city council in the last 20 years, 68% of those people who won in the primary. And so you're looking at their winning when only 35 to 40% of the people are voting. And so the number of votes that actually go to those winning candidates is very small. The primary would be eliminated. It would all move to the general election. So already we're getting better reflection of what the people of Portland want. Secondly, because it is ranked choice, and as Becca said, there are no wasted votes, that means that it is more accurate representation of what the people of Portland want or what the voters want. And so just looking at the multi-member voting, what it really seeks to do is remove wasted votes. So even if someone gets way too many votes, those excess votes could be transferred to the second choice. And that means that people don't have to go through that gaming of the system that many of us, I certainly did back in the 2020 election when we were trying to decide who's the safe person to vote for. If I vote for, say, Elizabeth Warren, will my vote be wasted? In this system, there are no wasted votes. So there are a lot of advantages. And I feel that it will be easy to understand, and we will be sending out information that makes it clearer for the voters.
Thank you, Commissioner Billings-Young. I know that the League will help with voter education, whatever the format and whatever comes along, but it's good to have that explanation. I wonder if any of the other commissioners have any comments about the election method.
The only thing I wanted to reemphasize is that to the voter, if you get into the election science and you get into the tabulation and how it all works, that's obviously really wonky and you could really dive deep into those details. But when it comes to the voter's experience, it's going to be simple. It's going to have it's easy to understand for most people, right? Like, I'm ranking my choices. And so that's really what the voter is going to experience. Yes, we could talk forever about all of the election science on ranked choice voting, on single transferable voting. And we certainly are not election scientists. So I know, don't ask me all of the nitty gritty details of that. But the point is that we are using proven systems that have been used. We're using it to achieve the outcomes that we are seeking, which is more representation, more options at the ballot box for voters. And if the voters are going to have a simple format in which to rank those options. So we just want to reemphasize that that's what we care right now about, is like that voter experience. And there's definitely a format for how everything on the back end works, but on the front end, we think that we've met an important outcome that Portlanders were asking for.
Thank you,
Just to-
Commissioner Avalos. Commissioner Urbelo.
I was just going to underscore the voter experience. We also looked at case studies in other jurisdictions who've moved to ranked choice voting. And what we've seen with voter surveys is not only do they are there better outcomes, they believe their vote is counted and they appreciate the outcome better in terms of who they're electing to represent them, but the voter experience, they're also reporting 90% or more are reporting that the actual experience of casting a ballot when they're sitting and filling out their ballot is a better experience for them. And I'll just touch briefly on the mechanics. It's actually pretty straightforward. Voters cast their ballot, they vote in order of preference. On the back end, those votes are tabulated for the mayor and auditor for the citywide at large. Votes are counted in rounds until someone reaches 50% or more. And then they're declared the winner. In the multi-member districts, a similar process. Votes are counted in rounds until 3 candidates reach the threshold.
Thank you, Commissioner Urbelo. We'd like to hear from Project Manager Meyer about why it was important for the commission to present these reform elements as an interdependent package. I think we've heard that already in some of your answers that start to intersect with the way the different elements, the 3 elements that we've spelled out as the reforms, but how are these going to work together?
Yeah, thank you for the question. And I think almost every commissioner here has referred to the desired outcomes of the Charter Commission. And so I'm going to start there too, because I think it's important to understand where we ended up. So early in the work, the Charter Commission set its desired outcomes, and it was a growing and participatory democracy that is more accessible, transparent, reflective, responsive, accountable, and trustworthy. And then the work emphasized designing a cohesive package that's meant to achieve those desired outcomes. So Commissioner Billings-Yoon, who's here, refers to the package as a 3-legged stool, which the 3 components that we've all kind of mentioned and talked about being a leg of the 3-legged stool. And so let's just kind of talk through what it would mean to remove one of these legs, right? Because that's what we're talking about. So I know that folks, I've certainly heard some folks say, well, what if that form of government sort of stood on its own, right? And form of government being understood as, roles and responsibilities of the mayor and city councilors. So form of government stands on its own, as would, let's say, the expanded council elected by districts, as 2 of our 3 examples. So form of government stands on its own, it passes. And we have a mayor council form of government. And the expanded council with 12 members elected by district does not pass, as an example. So we're removing the leg of the stool that's the expanded council elected by districts. So now you have one of the legs that is the mayor council form of government. That has the separation of powers, so the mayor is no longer a member of city council. And what you have left is 4 city councilors. And those 4 people alone are the sole legislative body of the city of Portland. Those 4 individuals will be responsible for passing every law for our entire city. So we would be going from a system that has one of the smallest city councils of any city of our size to this, we already have the smallest, the more smallest city council. I think that is definitely not achieving the desired outcomes that the Charter Commission set. So let's do the same thing in reverse, right? So form of government and then you have expanded council elected by district. And we take the alternative result. So form of government does not pass. We retain our current commission form of government, but we now have a larger council elected by districts. So the crucial component of a commission form of government is that city commissioners directly manage city bureaus. So I live in Northeast Portland. Let's say I'm now elected by districts. I'm a city commissioner and I get the Parks Bureau, the Police Bureau, the Fire Department, name your bureau. And now you have a commissioner representing one geographic part of our city, managing our entire park system, our entire police bureau, right? And the concern is, now does Northeast Portland get better parks advocacy, have faster fire response times, right? So I think when you think through the outcomes of what happens, it's hard to say that this is not a three-legged stool, right? We need all of the elements working together to achieve the desired outcomes that the Charter Commission said early in its work. And ultimately, I think we believe, I think others have supported this, that there is one kind of unifying principle to all of these components, which is reforming the structure and operations of our city government.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. Did any of the commissioners want to add to that question about the interdependence of these elements? Thinking about it. Julia did a great job. Thank you. As we move into our final questions, I want to remind audience members that if you would like to ask a question of the panelists, you can type your question into the chat function. And we have received some already. We will keep receiving questions and we will bring them to the panel as we have time. So just feel free to put your comment in the chat and we'll read that on our end. Our last question is really open to all four of you. And in any order you would like to grab this one. We'd like to kind of reflecting back on your experience so far as part of the Charter Commission. What have you learned about the city of Portland and the people who live here? Has anything surprised you about your experience with the commission over the past 2 years?
Why don't we just go in the same order that we started with? Candace, you're always a wonderful first.
Great. If that's okay, Commissioner Avalos.
Great. I am happy to kick us off. So as far as what I've learned about this process and Portlanders, really the biggest thing that I heard from all of our engagement that we did is that people want to feel heard, they want to feel represented. So that was a really crucial part of our work to meet that outcome. And another huge outcome was people want to have a functioning government that works for them, that they feel is really working to tackle all of our complex problems. And so the combination of having a commission form of government and not having some kind of geographic representation, which, we think that geographic is super important. And also there's lots of other ways that people want to feel represented. And so that's where the combination of the geographic districts and the type of voting really helps meet both of those needs, because that was what I feel like I heard the most. I think what surprised me about this experience, we always say that we're a really diverse commission, and I feel like people hear diverse and they think racial and ethnic diversity. I think it's important to point out like how much diversity we have in work experience, different ideologies, different sectors that people are bringing their knowledge from. And it was hard sometimes to get to consensus. It was hard to move certain issues forward, but I think that through, it took grit, it took organizing, it took compromise, and lots of discussion. And with the guidance of Portlanders, I'm actually really proud of what we were able to present and think that we did our best to meet the needs of each other as a commission, meet the needs of the communities that we're representing on it. And I feel like that was really an inspiring experience in a time where people think that no one can agree, or people think that when you put a bunch of folks together that come from different walks of life, they can't get to meet an outcome together. And that's so not true. And I think our commission really proved that. So I'm hoping that what we have created, we always say that the charter changes are not a panacea. And what we mean by that is it's really going to take leadership to bring us into the future of Portland. So we're hoping the combination of creating a form of government that is more easy to navigate, can create more efficiencies, and letting Portlanders voice their choices for who represent them in a more thorough way is going to create this awesome opportunity for new voices to come in and to start working on tackling our complex issues. And I feel strongly that we're setting up Portland for success. And now it's up to Portlanders to help put all of this into action. Yeah, thanks.
Commissioner Urbelau?
You know, it's been such an honor and a privilege to serve on the commission and to have the opportunity to be in conversation with thousands of Portlanders over the last 2 years. I don't know if I've learned it rather than been reminded of how much we love our city, right? How much we're collectively rooting for its success and how willing Portlanders are to dive deep and get really engaged in helping to build and create a policy that they can see themselves in, which I fundamentally believe the Charter Commission was able to do with the help of Portlanders. And I don't know if it was a surprise, but it was illuminating to realize how much work it takes to intentionally build a process that's inclusive and that actually meaningfully engaged Portlanders and provided access to be part of the conversation. And also how diligent and thoughtful the Charter Commission and the Portlanders who've been on this path with us. We've had a lot of folks hang on with us for 2 years, but how diligent we all have been in developing the well thought out and meticulously researched policy that help advance these shared goals that Portlanders informed, ensuring, you know, a fully participatory democracy and a more accountable and representative form of government. And as Commissioner Avalos mentioned, this is really the foundation, both in terms of what the policy sets the stage for, right? Creating a system to ensure that Portlanders are better able and more empowered to help determine our collective fate, but also for the process, right? Like, I hope that the thousands of Portlanders that we've talked to over the 1,000 hours of work we've done in the past 2 years stay connected after November, right? Whatever the system looks like, that they stay as engaged as they have been in this process.
That's great. Thank you, Commissioner Urbelau. Commissioner Billings-Young.
Well, I'm going to sound like I'm just copying the other two, but I'll take a slightly different approach. I also have been amazed and impressed with the level of concern that Portlanders have in our city. Becca has talked about love for the city, and she's right. But I guess what has most affected me is the level of despair. The number of Portlanders, especially on the east side, who feel that no one is looking out for their interests. No one understands the problems that they're facing. They don't know when something goes wrong, who they can go to, who they can call. When they say, look at our streets, people are racing and killing people. No one in the government seems to care about that. Someone is elected as a representative of the people and is immediately put in charge of a bureau. What is wrong with this system? I myself am in this category when I was trying to get some trash cleaned up on an overpass near my home, and every single bureau I called told me to call another bureau. So the level of despair, and that isn't only through the conversations that we have had, and that has been very impressive, by the way. We've had public listening sessions, and they have sold out, they have filled up with the number of people that wanted to come and just tell us about their issues. But there was a poll done, the most recent poll that was done partly by North Star Civic and partly by Portland Business Alliance. And one of the questions, I'm reading it here, is, in your opinion, does the structure of government of Portland need a complete overhaul, major change, minor change, or no change at all? The number of people that said minor change or no change was 15%. The number of people who said that they want a complete overhaul was the largest group at 42%. These are people who feel that this is not something that can be easily fixed. what has given me the greatest joy in this is that we have, rather than saying, okay, what do we want to fix? We started with what outcomes do we want? Rather than going to the bureaus or whoever and say, what do you want fixed? We went again and again and again to the people. We did huge numbers of listening sessions, and this was built from the bottom up. I have said this before, but I will say it again with the utmost sincerity. And first of all, I'm going to do what a lady should never do and tell you that, what's the date today? That in less than 3 weeks, I will be 70 years old. And I've done a lot of things. And there is nothing that I have done that has given me greater pride than being on this commission and working towards something that will end that despair and bring back the love of all those Portlanders.
Thank you, Commissioner Billings-Young. Ms. Meyer, do you have any comments? What you've learned through this process so far?
I really appreciate what all of the commissioners shared. I do feel that I might be a bit repetitive. I mean, it is a lot to reflect on. You know, I think that this charter commission is only the 4th charter commission in the last 100 years at the city of Portland. We are 21 months into this charter review process. We have 3 months to go. Last week, we had our 100th public meeting of the Charter Commission. So there is a lot, I think, to reflect on, and there will be a lot to reflect on, probably for a while. You know, the charter for the city of Portland is unusual for a few reasons, one of which is it's very long. It's much longer than comparable jurisdictions. It's 200 pages or so long. And the Charter Commission's current proposal, you know, amends, adds, deletes more than 100 sections across the charter, right? The charter all speaks to itself, right? And is interrelated. You can't change sort of one provision without, you know, looking across the charter for the impact of that change. And I guess I want to acknowledge that, you know, when you sit down to really reform the structure and operations of a whole government for a set of outcomes, each individual would probably do that slightly differently, right? It's 200 pages. The proposal doesn't reflect any single individual's ideal charter. You know, I mean, there's 650,000 Portlanders. Like, if you gave them the task of reviewing and revising our city's charter, we would probably end up with 650,000 different charters. And they would all probably have great aspects to them, right? And there'd be parts I prefer and parts I don't prefer. So I think what I have so much appreciated and been proud to participate in with this work is what everyone else has said, which is this is about a collaborative product, right? It's been about listening, engaging, you know, talking to each other, talking to community members to come up with the best revision of the charter that we could. And it's been incredible how much folks have engaged. I mean, I have read every public comment that we have received, and we have gotten 5-word public comments followed by a lot of exclamation points. And we have gotten, you know, dozen-page research reports with lots of footnotes, you know, and folks have engaged in a multitude of ways, and we have read them all. And it's really just been an incredible experience. And I do think there is a learning opportunity also for the city of Portland itself to invest and support community engagement in crucial public processes, because Portlanders show up and participate, and it improves the work.
Thank you, Ms. Meyer. I would reflect that not uniformly, but I'm hearing hope and I'm hearing some positive feelings about the city of Portland, which I think is, it's heartening to hear that. So thank you. We have been receiving a number of questions through the chat that I'd like to bring to you. And I will just open up these questions. We've got a good chunk of time and we've got a lot of questions to cover. So I'll open up these questions and whoever feels like answering them. We received a number of questions about the districts and why, well, not just districts, but why you chose 12 members of the city council. One viewer noted that Portland, Maine has a population about the 10th the size of Portland, but has 8 city councilors, some district-based, some at large, as well as the mayor. So more than us, even with fewer residents. So there are questions several people asked. How did you choose the number of 12 city council members? Why did you choose 4 districts with 3 elected officials? Why not 12 districts with 1 member each? How did you come to the decision around 12 with 4 districts and 3 elected officials?
Candace, you started us with districts. Why don't you keep going?
I'm actually sending it to Becca. She's gonna do it.
I'm happy to answer that question. And there's 2 components, both the size and then the configuration, right, of the expanded council. In terms of the configuration, meaning why did we not go with single member districts as opposed to these multi-member districts? We did years-long study and case study in other jurisdictions to see what made sense for Portland. And there are single member districts may work for other cities. If you look at how the geography and demography of Portland and how we're spread out, we're just that, we're spread out. There aren't neighborhoods that have the, concentration of renters or a concentration of people of color, a concentration of young people. We are dispersed throughout the city. And so in terms of meeting our goal, desired outcome, which was informed by Portlanders, an increased representation, single member districts would not lead to increased representation for folks who have not had a voice in City Hall. So that's what multi-member districts accomplishes. It allows, again, coupled with ranked choice voting, the idea and notion of proportional representation helps ensure that you are guaranteed a voice on city council. So that's one reason I think why, or the conversation that we had not choosing single member districts. The other is what we heard as kind of cautionary tales from jurisdictions who've had single member districts in terms of its impact on policy. What we've heard is that single member district folks and representatives are really, really focused on their geography, like too hyper focused on their geography and kind of lose sight of kind of a citywide or a larger view. And that has led to blocking like affordable housing development in that particular district because someone is so focused on their single member district. And we wanted to avoid that process. And then I think the third conversation we had around single member versus multi-member districts was also what we've seen, again, case studies and research have shown that multi-member districts lead to increased collaboration and coordination of folks working together, both on policy as well as on serving constituents. I think I saw one person in the chat saying, well, if we have 3 folks representing a district, can't they all just pass the buck and then nobody's responsible for constituent services? And I would say that happens now, right? That happens now with 4 members of the city council and at large setting. We are actually increasing Portlanders' chances. You get more pathways to help access services and help have a voice in making policy. And then in terms of the size, I mean, I'll just be pragmatic. That was what Portlanders said that was as big as they would go, right? Because we developed a package that was informed by Portlanders and their desire to craft the policy, but also understanding what they would vote for and support. And we heard repeatedly that 12-member council was kind of 12, 13 was as highest as they would go. And that anything bigger than that seemed a little too large. I will say just coincidentally, although maybe some of us thought about this at the time, but When we first adopted a commission form of government with 4 members of the city council and a mayor in 1913, it was 1 city councilor to about one to about 52,000 Portlanders. We're actually now returning to that same ratio, which I find fascinating.
That's a great answer, Becca. I'm just going to add really briefly that early on in the process, we met with, there was a big convention of city managers, and we talked to a lot of them, and we heard repeatedly that their idea of the sweet spot is about 1 representative for every 50,000 people, which is what we're going for now. And there were some comparisons, but if we look at a couple of cities that are about our size, Boston at 690,000 has 13. And Memphis at 650,000 also has 13. So we are right in the level of really where we should be given the growth of our city. Our city has increased, as Becca says, from 200,000 to 650. The number of our councilors has increased not at all.
Thank you, Commissioner Burlington. And I'm seeing some appreciation for the response in the chat. So thanks for helping clarify these questions. There's a few questions about the district commission, the districting commission, and how those commissioners will be selected, what their qualifications would be, and why did you choose the method you did to have the districting commission separate from your work?
Do you want to take that one, Candace?
Okay, I can take that one. So, we discussed, okay, where do I start? Let's start here. We wanted to make sure that there were guidelines for creating the districts that were similar to different jurisdictions across the state, right? So there are some very basic standards, like making sure that districts are about equal size in population, making sure to not cut through communities of interest. So those are kind of like the high level things that we want to make sure a districting commission will do when creating those lines. We talked at length about whether we felt we should draw the lines or we should have a separate commission. I muted myself, sorry. I don't know where I muted myself. We talked at length on whether we should have whether we should do the lines or whether we should have a separate commission. I think the reason mainly that we landed on having a separate commission, there is a lot of time that's going to need to go into creating those lines. There's a lot of extra research that was going to need to be done, and different levels of expertise that we would want to have in that kind of districting commission. So we felt it was important to put all of those resources towards, really having a hardy commission that can do that work. We didn't feel that that was our work necessarily. And, I think ultimately with the 4 major districts, there's our goal in doing the 4 districts, like Becca was already talking about, just being able to capture more different communities in those districts. And we're hoping that with those other guidelines we've proposed, we're going to do our best to make sure that, again, they're equally represented, that there's community engagement processes to ensure where are people living, doing that research, talking to communities, seeing what makes sense for Portland. So that whole process felt like it needed another set of eyes and another longer timeline. And we didn't think we could accomplish that in our charter process. We also, it's important for people to understand that we were not intending at all to actually put the lines in the charter, because the charter is a very immovable document. And yes, even though it's a every 10-year thing that we have to look at it, that it's a really high threshold to make those changes. And that districting commission needs to have a lot of flexibility to adapt to census information, to be able to do everything in a timely fashion when that new information comes. So actually drawing the lines into the charter was not ever going to be our goal, because that's not really where that kind of information should live. So that's kind of big picture. Happy for anyone else to chime in if I missed anything.
That's
Let me
helpful.
try- Go ahead.
Go ahead, Commissioner Herblau.
Oh, the two things that were added, and thank you for Candace, just in answer to specific questions in the chat was, one of the questions was, why didn't we have the city council draw? We chose an independent commission because that's what Portlanders asked us to do, right? It was in response directly. Portlanders wanted it to be an independent commission. They didn't want city council to draw the lines, and kind of continue that narrative in terms of qualifications of folks who can serve on the districting commission. We wanted to ensure to kind of validate the integrity of its independence. So if you're a sitting city commissioner or a candidate, you cannot serve on the independent redistricting commission. But we also wanted to lower the barrier for everyone else to be able to participate, right? Encourage folks, regardless of their kind of level of civic engagement, they may be, new to civic engagement, that they would still have the opportunity to participate in the districting commission.
Thank you, Commissioner Arbelow. I have a number of questions from the audience I'd like to bring to you. Several are about voting methods and ranked choice voting. And we have focused in our remarks mostly on kind of the voter experience of ranked choice voting instead of the back end, the counting, which we hope to is another conversation. But I wanted to start by asking Ms. Meyer about the question of how we will implement ranked choice voting in Portland, knowing that Multnomah County runs our elections. I don't know if you could also speak to the charter reform that the county is putting forth about ranked choice voting as well, which is an interesting timing that those might be coming to our ballots at the same time. So I don't know if you could speak to anything about how you're working with the county to implement ranked choice voting.
Yeah, thank you, Audrey. And I did want to just jump in on the last question. And so now that I have the floor, because I don't remember if someone said it, and I know it was a specific question. There was, how did members of the Independent District Commission get to serve? So I just want to clarify, it's a 13-member body, and folks would be appointed by the mayor and then confirmed by a simple majority of city council. And if voters pass the measure in November, basically the city is going to release like a public application process that week. And then there'll be a lot of outreach about and sort of learning opportunities about how to apply and how to get engaged. So I just wanted to close the loop on that. So ranked choice voting implementation. Yes, to Audrey's point. So the counties are the administrators of elections. So the city of Portland, we have an elections office at the city, but we are not, we have a partnership and we have the counties actually administer the elections. So the city of Portland, as I'm sure many of you know, has voters across 3 counties. The vast majority of us are in Multnomah County, but there are City of Portland voters in Washington County and Clackamas County. So City of Portland staff from the Office of Management and Finance, as well as the Elections Office, has been meeting with all 3 elections officers from across those 3 counties, starting quite a long time ago in this charter review process, to begin to not only communicate with them and ensure that they know what the Portland Charter Commission was considering, but also to talk through how we begin to plan for any transition if voters pass the measure. Our next meeting with all 3 counties is next week, I think, or the week after. It is the case that in the state of Oregon, counties can work together and have partnership agreements on terms of voter tabulation and other kind of back end voting. So there's no barrier to implementing ranked choice voting in the city of Portland across 3 counties. In terms of the county ballot measure, so if folks are aware, Multnomah County also has periodic charter review done by a charter review committee every 6 years. And this year, Multnomah County's charter review happened to coincide with the city of Portland's charter review process. That is unusual. Theirs is every 6 years, ours is every 10 years, happen to occur at the same time. The Multnomah County Charter Review Committee forwarded 7 I think ballot measures to the November 8th, 2022 ballot, one of which is about ranked choice voting for, I believe, all county elections, implemented as soon as possible, but no later than 2026. So certainly we will be talking with the Multnomah County Elections Officer in particular after the election. If Multnomah County voters approve that ballot measure, then the county obviously needs to do dual implementation in Multnomah County and the city of Portland for ranked choice voting.
We had a few questions also about the role of the mayor and why you chose to have a mayor select the city administrator instead of the mayor and city council. And just in general, what are checks and balances between the council and the mayor?
So I'll take that one. It was very interesting when we initially started speaking to Portlanders. We offered them the two basic systems that we know about, which would be the mayor-council form, in which the mayor, if you think of a strong mayor as being the person who's in charge of all the bureaus, and then the council is a legislative body. The other one would be the council manager form, where you have a city council, which more or less runs things with a very weak mayor, and then the city council appoints a city, not administrator, a city manager. So in all of the meetings we were getting, people were saying, well, we really like the idea of that city manager because we want someone who can just disentangle the bureaucracy that we have right now, but we don't like it to be an unelected person. We want someone who can be accountable, who we can vote out if it's not being done properly. At the same time, they didn't want it to be the city council because they said, what if there's just gridlock and then nothing gets done? And the more and more we heard these constant back and forth, we realized that we were putting up a false choice. Why should it have to be this system or that? So what we decided was to create something that is a little bit closer to the federal system, where you have a mayor who is an executive. Underneath that mayor, the mayor would appoint the administrator who would run bureaus. That administrator would have to be confirmed by the city council. The city council could then become a legislative and representative body. And so each person is doing their own specific job. The mayor is running day-to-day things through the work of the city administrator, who would have to be, and this is within the terms of the charter as we wrote it, would have to be someone with professional management background. The mayor would have the ability to name that person, although again, as I say, that person would have to be confirmed. The mayor would also have the ability to fire that person. However, Portlanders were very clear that they wanted a system of checks and balances. So we also put in that the city council would be able to dismiss the city administrator by a supermajority. It would not be easy, but that's there in case there were any concerns that there might be collusion between the mayor and that city administrator. So in each case, we have checks and balances. The mayor proposes the budget, but the city council must approve the budget. The mayor proposes, the city administrator, the city council has to approve that administrator. The city council will legislate, but the mayor is the one who carries out those laws. So each person has their own area in which they work. But again, going back to our three-legged stool requires a level of cooperation between all of them to make the city work. No one is given overweening power.
Thank you, Commissioner Billington.
I would just
Commissioner Arbolado, did you want to add? Yeah.
just a direct answer to one of the related questions in the chat. There was a question around why no mayoral veto. So this was also something that we talked about extensively. And I think a number of things went into our conversation and decision around that. One, again, repeatedly, we heard from Portlanders around this notion of checks and balances, that giving the mayor veto power was concentrating power in an executive, giving kind of, again, imbalance of power. We also spent a lot of time looking back in history and seeing, that this has been something similar has been on the ballot multiple times, right? In Portland, the last time was in 2007. And it's failed pretty spectacularly. Voters have rejected it. And so we wanted to do some analysis of why. And what we learned from that experience was, again, the concentration of power in a mayor. And so we had folks say yes, a veto, but we had many Portlanders come to us and say, again, please don't give the mayor a veto, it concentrates too much power. So we had a qualitative analysis around that. And then just recently, it's confirmed through some quantitative analysis where we just received some survey data of voters and Portlanders that said voters, the majority of which do not want to give the mayor a veto.
That's great. Thank you, Commissioner. We have so many wonderful questions from the audience. I'd love to bring them all. There's two more that we really want to make sure we squeeze in. One is about why the threshold is 25% for 3 members in proportional voting. Commissioner Billings-Young.
Sure. In fact, they said, why not 33%? So I'm going to do some simple math with you guys. I'm going to give you a minute to think, and it will all become clear. In any election, ranked choice or not, you have an election between 2-3 people. You can vote for one person. What is the threshold for that person to win? You all know the answer. You're thinking it. It's 50% plus 1. Why is it 50% plus 1? Because once you hit that number, no one else can beat it. No one else can match it. So now we have 3 people running. 25, 25, 25, 75%. Plus 1, 2, 3. No one else can hit 25% because each one of those slightly exceeds 25%. And so 25% is the number beyond which no other sad little character can rise up to that level.
Thank you for that. I know that our league folks are the folks who are, real excited and interested in a lot of the pieces of how these election methods and government get put together. So we're folks who are interested in that sort of policy. So, but one final question is kind of looking forward, questions about how we might make changes in the future. If the reform does not pass, is there another mechanism to change Portland's governance? Do we have to wait 10 years? And on the other hand, if the reforms do pass and there need to be some tweaks later on, how would that happen?
I'm happy to start off. So there are 3 ways in which you can either change fundamentally or make tweaks, right? Which is wait 10 years for another charter commission to be impaneled. The city council could refer something directly to voters, or by citizen initiative. You could gather enough signatures to put something on the ballot. Again, wholesale change or tweaks. So those are the pathways. I will just say, practically speaking, as someone who has, 15, 20 years in working in ballot measures, if the measure fails in November, it will be near impossible for voters to say yes to any configuration of something that they just said no to, right? So even if we don't wait 10 years for the Charter Commission to refer something and the City Council wants to refer something, it goes against all elections history for voters to turn around and say yes to something that they said no to with a few variances.
And how about tweaking? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I think Becca said this, but I just want to emphasize it because I do think it's important. Anything that's in the charter that folks want to change, whether it's tweaking, like, which I'm taking to mean a minor change, or it's a major change, has to be approved by Portland voters. Like, there's no other mechanism because it's something small. Right. Actually, the auditor's office is empowered to change a typo. Like, if you mean that is a minor tweak, then it can be done as sort of what is called a Scribner. It's a Scribner's error. If we're talking about minor changes to a form of government or election system, it has to go through one of the 3 mechanisms that Becca just outlined, and then Portlanders have to approve it. Because again, the charter is like our city's constitution. No one is empowered to amend it except Portlanders.
Thank you all for your responses to our questions and being so thoughtful and engaging with the members of this audience. I'd like to turn it over to our president, Debbie Kay.
Thank you very much. What an amazing presentation. Thank you to our speakers for providing such a stimulating, informative discussion and for answering so many questions from our engaged audience members. We appreciate the critically important work that you do to represent and engage the community in the city's charter review process. The League of Women Voters is an organization that exists to empower civic engagement. You all have been an example of helping make democracy work. You're part of a massive public community education process. We appreciate that you have reached out to engage voters and potential voters and everyone impacted by their votes. We've learned a lot watching your work, and we're grateful that you have served our city in this so important way. Of course, I must remind voters, viewers and listeners about the importance of voting in the upcoming November 8th general election. Your vote is your voice. You must register to vote by October 18th if you are not already registered, and you can do so through our voter education website, vote411.org. You can also find voter education materials a little closer to that election there on Vote 411 and on our website at lwvpdx.org. The League's next community education program will be on gun safety, responsible use, and policy. We never pick up small issues, only big ones. This program will highlight measures to prevent gun violence and injuries to help ensure safety in our schools and our neighborhoods. Please mark your calendars. This program on gun safety will be held on October 5th at 7 p.m. The League of Women Voters is a membership organization. We welcome you to join us and would also value your financial support in presenting these and other relevant programs. Please see our membership and donor information again at our website, lwvpdx.org. We hope that you will join us for another community education program in the future. Thank you all very much.